The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 55. Everyone's Man. Part 1. While the issues related to the Barco family were still being discussed all around, Rihanna Dimitri went to a banquet after quite a long time. Oh, my. You are here. I was waiting for you to come. At her arrival, all the wives of the Northeast region, who had gathered in advance, stood up from their seats. The organizer of this meeting was Helena of the Melloch family. From the beginning, she was famous as a pro-Dimitri, but when Barco collapsed and Dimitri's name rose, she quickly organized a banquet. It was a show-off. She wanted to show the fact that the Northeast region would now be dominated by the Dimitri family. Naturally, the wives of nobles moved to attend the banquet. However, some new faces were also seen there. The wives, who earlier sided with Barco, now welcomed Rihanna with a fake smile on their faces. Somehow, I think you are getting prettier day by day. Rihanna, I have prepared a special wine for you. Think of it as my gift, and please enjoy it comfortably. Their intention was obvious. Seeing the fall of Barco, the wives of the noble families who had fallen apart expressed their intention to attend the banquet and join hands with Dimitri. Their pride didn't matter. They visited Helena of the Melloch family every day to become friends with her, and after achieving that, they asked for even a single chance to meet with Rihanna Dimitri. Obviously, Rihanna was informed about the current situation in advance. She wasn't a fan of talking with strangers, but she knew what to do now. Thank you. She received their gifts and compliments as if it was natural to do that. There is something that people often misunderstand. They believe the Dimitri family has reached their current position due to the enormous wealth of Baron Romero. However, those who worked behind the scenes knew that it was only possible due to Rihanna's devotion. Rihanna created her own power by attracting wives in the Northeast. It was a political thing that Baron Romero couldn't do. And Rihanna was able to form the pro-Dimitri with the wives she hung out with. If she hadn't assembled the board in advance, Dimitri might have collapsed long before they could even rival Barco as a powerhouse. Dimitri's wife, Rihanna, came into the banquet and naturally proved the status of Dimitri had changed. Thank you all for gathering here. The reason we came together isn't because of some special reason, but because we thought that as people living in the same region, we should at least get to know each other. Of course, not all of us have been looking in the same direction till now. However, as the situation has changed, we must also change with the changed reality. It could be believed those words were said sarcastically. However, Rihanna secretly touched those who were on the side of Barco, and at the same time, she told them she would accept them. As a result of that, after the meeting, the wives will return to their families and tell the others that they should act better with the Dimitri family. It is a small thing, but this small thing will lead to a tremendous difference. Rihanna knew all too well from her experiences that letting the sides of Barco come here is to show them room for cooperation. The Dimitri family became a powerful force in the Northeast region, all thanks to Rihanna's help. In the eyes of others, it may appear like a simple gathering of wives, but due to Rihanna's actions, Dimitri's power in the Northeast would be solidified even further. And like that, they chatted for a while and had refreshments. The wives, who were sipping tea while talking to each other, now began to focus on one topic. Rihanna, what do you think of our Veronica? I think she would be a good match for Roman. Helena's words made everyone stiff. Arranged marriage, in the aristocratic world, it was a common thing. However, how does arranged marriage usually happen? Yes, it happens due to the discussions between wives at such banquets. Ignoring others' reactions, Helena, who was lucky to initiate the conversation, added, Roman is already 25 years old. For a brighter future, I think it will be necessary for him to find a wise wife and begin a family, as well. Although it is a bit embarrassing to compliment my own daughter, I think Veronica would look good with Roman. Am I being too confident now? Ha ha ha. Helena covered her lips and smiled, turning the air chilly. 6 years earlier, Roman Dimitri was a major topic of discussion in the aristocratic world. As he was from the Dmitri family, many wanted to form a connection. However, knowing that he wouldn't be the successor of the family despite being the eldest, they halted. At that time, apparently, Helena said, "Veronica is a bit too young to be with Roman. It will be better once she is a bit older, and maybe I will think about the marriage then." She was a pro-Dmitri. However, she was reluctant to let her daughter get married to Roman. No family wanted to give their child to Roman in the past, to the point that they talked about marrying the second son. The other people also reacted similarly. However, now, those people, who had similar attitudes as Helena in the past, were reacting with discomfort hearing her words. "Hey, aren't Veronica and Roman different, though? I heard that Veronica got arranged with another family heir not long ago." "Helena, I understand your greed, but that is too much for Roman," said one lady. She was someone who earlier had a character of calling Roman names right in front of Rihanna. She would even call him trash in front of her, but now, she was appreciating Roman's value. "That's right. The marriage of Roman has to be done carefully. Don't limit the options, Rihanna. It is good to meet a variety of people. In that sense, please visit our family once in the future, as well. I didn't tell you this earlier, but my child said she fell in love with Roman at first sight," said another lady. She, too, would often curse Roman too much earlier. However, now, she had completely forgotten her past actions and was asking for Roman's hand for marriage. The situation had turned into a total mess due to the flames ignited by Helena. The wives who attended this gathering showed greed for Roman. It wasn't just about parents wanting Roman for their own daughters, but even for cousins. It was a fun sight. Due to the incident with Barco, Roman's value had skyrocketed. Well, it couldn't be helped. Honestly, Roman had shown his potential by going against the four-star Aura swordsman, Homer. It proved the Dmitri family would be in his grasp in the future. And naturally, people's thoughts changed. Not long ago, the annulling of engagement with Lawrence was considered a blemish, however, no one seemed to care about it now. Rather, they considered themselves lucky, thinking Lawrence didn't snatch Roman. Tap. It makes me happy that everyone thinks so good about my son. Rihanna put the teacup down. The current atmosphere wasn't bad. Nevertheless, she had no intention of using her son for any political gains. Roman had been through a lot of pain recently. He was promised the daughter of the Lawrence family, but for bad reasons, they had to break it down. And then, I had this thought, I shouldn't allow Roman to go through the same pain again. Thus, talking about arranged marriage makes no sense to me. I hope he finds someone he truly loves and who loves him back the same way. That is all I want from Roman's better half. Rihanna drew a clear line, there will be no arranged marriage. Still, the problem is that her words ignited rivalry among the wives. In other words, regardless of the status, the one who captures the heart of Roman wins? Then, he's everyone's man. Because of the greed for Roman, the expressions of the noble wives changed instantly. After the war was over, Flora locked herself in her room. Fortunately, Lawrence survived, but her experiences on the field had given her too much of a shock. "I need strength to live in the world." The war between Lawrence and Barco was one where it was natural for them to have lost. Lawrence couldn't even afford a single flare or someone like Homer. She had advised the Viscount to stock the food and last all the way through the winter because she read it in the books, but that was nothing like the reality she saw. The helplessness she felt at that time was horrible. As she watched the troops of the enemy rush in like ants, Flora felt her mind shatter. However, Roman was different. Due to the strength of a single individual, Barco was defeated, and the war was won. How in the world can one become that strong? It was amazing. It wasn't just about the individual's power. Roman showed the audacity to attack the rear of Barco with a small force, and even after hearing the name of Homer, he said he would fight. His courage was astounding. The confidence and strength somehow looked different on Roman. Still, what he was now was the ideal type she dreamed of. The imaginary being who was confident in everything began to overlap with Roman at one point. She shook her head, no. She didn't like the person named Roman. She couldn't believe that someone who was selfish and cared about their own interest could be her ideal type. However, she wanted to know a bit more. How could Roman be so strong? What kind of person is Roman? The problem is that her relationship with him was broken, and she had no way of seeing Roman again. For now, let's focus on reality. She turned her attention to the book. She wanted to be strong, like Roman. She hoped for the power to solve any problem in any situation. So, even after the war was over, she stayed in the room with piles of books. Obviously, books are never the perfect solution. However, she at least wanted to relive this feeling of being stuck in a maze, even if it was only for a while. How many days passed? One day, she came out to get some fresh air, and saw an unexpected visitor. "Sister, it has been a while." Sylvia. It was a familiar face. She was a woman with typical beautiful features and had sky blue hair. She was her cousin, Sylvia. What is she doing here? It was surprising. Sylvia's father was the younger brother of Viscount Lawrence, who ceded the title of Viscount to his brother, and established himself as a merchant in the capital. Was it because she spent all her time in the capital? Sylvia was known to hate coming down to Lawrence. Like Flora, she had inherited the bloodline of Lawrence and had a pretty form. However, she was called Lawrence's which due to her picky side. And now this woman was in Lawrence? This all felt too abrupt for Flora to understand. Why come to Lawrence? And she glanced at the girl from top to bottom. She looked pretty. Looking at the dress she was wearing, it didn't seem like this was a simple visit. What is with those clothes? What do you mean? I was told that a grand banquet was being thrown for the eldest child of the Dmitri family. Uncle told me that I should brighten up the place, so I came running here. However, sister, is Roman Dmitri really a great and handsome man? Everyone is speaking so many things about him that I am so curious, said Sylvia. When Sylvia showed off her appearance and talked about Roman, Flora felt uncomfortable. A grand banquet for the eldest son of Dmitri? This wasn't a piece of small news. She should have known this. As Sylvia had already come to Lawrence, it was obvious that Flora should be preparing for the banquet now. Then, why am I hearing about it for the first time today? The banquet for Dmitri, Flora didn't have an inkling of a clue about it. Chapter 56. Everyone's Man. Part 2. The human heart is deceitful. If Flora had come to know about the grand banquet being held for Dmitri before the issue between Dmitri and Lawrence had happened, she would have made excuses to not go. However, things have changed, even setting aside her curiosity about Roman. For now, she needed time to reflect on herself. Thus, she stayed in her room for just a few days. Nevertheless, Sylvia said, "Sister, you didn't know about the banquet?" "Oh, I guess Uncle didn't tell you about it because of the annulment of the engagement. This grand banquet isn't being hosted by Dmitri but by Lawrence. As Lawrence just overcame an enormous hurdle with the help of Roman Dmitri, it seems that Uncle has planned a grand banquet for him. He invited me, as well. I was happy, wanting to go to the banquet with my sister, but seeing the current situation, I will go by myself." It was a heartbreaking moment. Even though Flora had no interest in the banquet, even though she didn't have any intention to participate in it in the first place, she somehow felt angry. In particular, hearing Sylvia's words, Flora felt as if she was turned down by her own father. Did he not tell me about it for that reason? Due to the annulment? She admitted it was embarrassing. However, considering the banquet was to thank Roman Dmitri for helping them, she had all the right to go there. Honestly, wasn't it her judgment that drew Roman into their war? Flora struggled and smiled in front of Sylvia. However, as soon as their conversation was over, she went straight to her father. "Father, there is a grand banquet being held for Dmitri. Why wasn't I told about it?" She asked it straightforwardly. "Why?" She wanted to know what her father was thinking. However, the answer she was given was unexpected. Viscount Lawrence looked at Flora stiffly and said, "Flora, through this incident, I, as your father, have realized a lot. Thus, I have made up my mind to never force you to do things you don't like in the future." To be honest, this answer was embarrassing to say. However, the war with Barco was something Viscount Lawrence seriously pondered. In particular, most of it was about Flora's change. He constantly thought of her as a flower he needed to protect, but still, she showed her true self amid the crisis. "I was stupid. Flora is a person who is capable of doing so much more, but due to my lack of insight, her full potential didn't come out." Flora's decision to annul the engagement was a natural choice. Flora deserves to live more for herself and not as someone else's woman. Watching his daughter fight till the end, Viscount Lawrence reflected on his actions. And what he realized was that he was terrible. He was a father who didn't know what his daughter was good at and forced her into marriage to solve the family's crisis. He never wanted to do that again. It was especially because he found out what his daughter was like. Thus, he made up his mind to not let her have regrets about her life. "Flora, my daughter, at the crossroads of life and death, I, your father, witnessed a talent that shined brighter than anyone else. Even if it wasn't from a father's perspective, you looked very cool back then. We were able to win the war because of your judgment and knowledge of what to do in a situation where everyone had given up, by bringing Roman Dmitri into the battle. So, from now on, live your life the way you want to. I will not repeat the same mistake of dropping your value down again, and I am ready to support you in whatever you want." Undoubtedly, that was an inspiring statement. Viscount Lawrence looked at Flora with eyes filled with love. Nevertheless, the problem was that Flora didn't want this. "I want to attend the banquet." Seeing that Sylvia was going to attend on her behalf, Flora didn't like it. She knew that Sylvia was a fox. When she imagined that woman flirting with Roman, she felt her mood turning grumpy. Honestly, she wanted to have a proper conversation with Roman. While speaking through the magic device, Roman said Flora was his person. Obviously, it was surprising for her. That was because she thought of him as cold and pragmatic. However, his action of taking revenge against Anthony for touching her made her want to see that man again. The time for self-blame was already over. Now, she was ready to face Roman. Was that why? Flora spoke differently than she usually did. "But why did you invite Sylvia to the banquet I wasn't told about?" "That's because of my personal greed." "Greed, no." Viscount Lawrence laughed softly. He had already let go of his daughter. In the future, he had planned for Flora to live independently. However, he still felt greedy for Roman. He's a man to be coveted. In the recent war, the actions of Roman were shocking. He had boldly decided to change the flow of the war by attacking Barco's rear and defeating Homer with just one slash from his sword. Lately, people have been calling Roman Dmitri the man of all men. He was a man everyone in the Northeast coveted, and naturally, Viscount Lawrence was no different. However, he couldn't use Flora for that. Therefore, he decided to invite Sylvia to replace Flora at the banquet. Ahem. Viscount Lawrence coughed. Seeing the Viscount refusing to answer the question, Flora said, "I understand. For that reason, I will help Sylvia and act like her guide. Still, this is an event to repay Roman Dmitri for what he did, and it doesn't make sense to not even tell me just because we were a bit entangled in the past." "It is fine. You don't have to go, daughter. I just hope you find someone you love in the future and marry him. I will not ask you to get involved with Roman Dmitri in the future, so don't worry." Viscount Lawrence didn't back down till the end. How can he be like this? For a moment, Flora wanted to bang her father on his head. In the end, it was decided that Flora would attend the banquet. However, it wasn't because of her stubbornness. She was about to give up due to her father's words, but then an invitation from Dmitri arrived. "Even though our relationship has deteriorated due to the unfortunate incident, How about proving to people that the recent incidents helped restore our relationship? Dmitri is ready to forget the past and start anew. At the grand banquet for Roman Dmitri, I hope the flower of Lawrence will shine, as well. Baron Romero is such a great man. Although Flora ignored Dmitri, Baron Romero responded first and told them that he wanted to reconcile their families. And that was a nice thing for Lawrence. With the collapse of Barco and the rise of Dmitri, if Dmitri showed a hostile attitude to Lawrence, then the Lawrence family would crumble to dust. Fortunately, that didn't happen, and Viscount Lawrence was relieved of his worries. Thankfully, Flora was allowed to attend the grand banquet, as well. Flora, Sylvia, and other noble families visited Dmitri together that afternoon. The party was scheduled for the evening, but many arrived early. Except for Flora. Everyone had a clear purpose. It was to snatch Roman, so they wanted to get to the place in advance. This is Dmitri. The rumored place. Walking through the center, the ladies of noble families showed a dissatisfied reaction, and Sylvia's was quite bad because no one in Dmitri seemed to care about her beauty. I don't know anything else, but I came to know that the Lord of Dmitri doesn't know art. I don't know how they live in such a place. In the capital, even commoners care about aesthetics, but Dmitri looks so dull. I wonder if this isn't even a mining place. And the complaints continued. How far did they walk? As they were returning back, they saw an unfamiliar sight. Oh. Are they miners? They could see a series of hordes walking by far away. Their bodies looked dusty, as if they had just finished their jobs, and their faces were so black that they couldn't even be recognized at all. Instantly, the faces of women, curious at first, frowned. And as the miners approached and created some dust in the surroundings, the women covered their noses. Ah, this pretty dress will get dirty. This is why Dmitri is a problem. Even miners can freely roam in the streets. It was a dual attitude. Nobles in the northeast region acknowledged the power of Dmitri, but knowing that Dmitri is a family that originated from commoners, they thought Dmitri was different from those of noble births. However, Flora's reaction was different. At one time, she, too, hesitated to get married to Dmitri due to such prejudices, but now that she knew Roman a little, she realized how foolish she had been. Now she didn't judge people so harshly. Due to that, she didn't walk too far away from the miners, unlike the others. Instead, as she knew that the miners were the source of wealth of Dmitri, she looked at them with curious eyes. Nevertheless, when she recognized someone within them, she was utterly shocked. Surely. She was certain of the familiar face, one of the miners was Roman Dmitri. At first, she thought she had seen it wrong. Why did Roman Dmitri appear with these miners? That too in shabby clothes, skin soiled with dirt. However, the face visible under the hard hat was clearly that of Roman Dmitri. And just then, a middle-aged man rushed toward Roman. Young master. Yes, it was Hans. After glancing at Roman's condition, Hans wiped his face with his handkerchief. I might not have stopped you from going to the mine, but if you work so much, then what about your body's condition? Will you not feel pained? Didn't I tell you? Young master's body doesn't belong to the young master alone. And my fragile heart will be torn each time you come back covered in dust. Take a look at this. Even after wiping just a little, the handkerchief turned dirty. It is all right. No. It isn't. Was it because Hans' voice was loud? The ears of the noble women, along with Sylvia, heard it, Dmitri's young master. Now that the rest of the sons had left Dmitri, there was only one person Hans could call young master. And that was Roman Dmitri. Instantly, the noble women's eyes turned to Roman. Then that man is Roman Dmitri? Their eyes were like a hyena that had caught its prey. Chapter 57. Everyone's Man. Part 3. Sylvia narrowed her eyes at Roman Dmitri. She looked carefully at her prey, who popped up here unexpectedly. Oh. He was more handsome than she expected. Even though his face was messed up due to the dust from the mine, the solid frame gave out a manly scent. Also, her admiration didn't end there. When her gaze, which was looking at his face for a long time, went to the body, a momentary exclamation came out, seeing the body frame revealed through the clothes. Wow! It was magnificent. As if it was a well-carved statue, Roman's body was flawless in Sylvia's eyes. She couldn't see them clearly because of the clothes he had on, but the gleaming muscles with sweat showed her an incredible scene. Honestly, she was regretting her decision of coming to Dimitri. She came to Lawrence due to her uncle's request, but she didn't expect Roman to be any good. Therefore, she had prayed that he was at least average. However, now that she saw him, it wasn't just that the appearance of the Roman was refined, but he was in absolutely perfect condition. The eldest child of the Dimitri family and the man who defeated the 4-star Aura swordsman, Homer. There was a rumor that the second child had a high chance of taking the position of the heir, but after today, I don't think that will happen. What noble family would let their son work in a mine? Baron Romero must have ordered him to do this in order to bring favor onto Roman's status. Well, it was worth coming down to Lawrence. Sylvia, done with her analysis, encouraged the noble women. Let's go meet Roman Dimitri. It will be nice to greet him before the banquet. You think so? Everyone had smiles on their faces. They, too, had the same purpose for coming here. Their mission was to win over Roman's heart, so they all encouraged each other to make a move. Hello. Are you Roman Dimitri? The women who were frowning until the last second were now smiling. Now, it didn't matter if the dust flew into their eyes or their dress got dirty, they all smiled like spring blossoms to Roman. However, Roman didn't answer. Then, Sylvia, who was staring at him, said, I am Sylvia of the Lawrence family. I wanted to express my sincere gratitude to you for helping out our family this time. Without the help of Mr. Roman, the Lawrence family wouldn't have survived the attack of the Barco family. However, as the rumors say, you are a wonderful man. There is a saying that a hero was born in the Dimitri family, and I can see why they refer to you like that. She was a sly fox. She spoke softly without the slightest hint of a frown to try and appeal to Roman. Nevertheless, the problem was that it was Roman she was dealing with. Ah, yes. I understand. That was what he said. It wasn't even an answer. It was more like, don't bother me. Without even giving any attention to Sylvia, Roman only turned and looked at Hans. At that moment, Pfft. Flora, who was in the distance, burst into laughter. Truly, Roman was quite consistent with his attitude. Knowing that she wasn't the only one going through a tough time, she approached Sylvia to comfort her. And Hans followed Roman. Young master. They are people who will be coming to the banquet later. Can't you be a little kinder to them? I would if they were worth it. However, I do not want to smile looking at them, right from the start. Sigh. Naturally, Hans sighed. If only Roman was a bit kinder, he could possibly have gained allies as he encouraged the women who came to greet him. However, Hans thought Roman was acting a little childish, seeing him draw a clear line right from the beginning. Hans said, I see. But how long do you plan to work in the mine? Even though the Lord didn't give any orders for you to do it, you have been suffering there for days already. Everyone is worried. Recently, there were a lot who discussed Roman's actions. In particular, Baron Romero and Rihanna were concerned about Roman's health. Thus, Hans asked the question on their behalf. Roman didn't stop walking and said to Hans, do you remember the farmer we met in the slum? Of course. He could never forget it. That was the day Roman began to change, and the impact of it was so strong that the memories were clear as crystal in his mind. The man who lived for 90 years told me the history of Dimitri. Dimitri was originally a commoner's family, but it was said that we were able to rise to the present position with the iron that came to the blacksmiths. From then on, I kept pondering it. Dimitri's roots are the forge and metal, then shouldn't I know more about them? In his new life, Roman had already accepted reality. He allowed new people into his circle, and the name Roman Dimitri was something he was now getting used to. Thus, he fully wanted to understand Dmitri. It wasn't even closely related to thoughts of being the heir. Just as he climbed to the apex of the demonic sect from the bottom, he wanted to feel the breath of this place right from the bottom. And that is why he went to the iron mine. Most people thought that the blacksmiths were the foundation of Dmitri, but Roman believed that it was the miners. He didn't even bother asking his father for permission. He suddenly went to the iron mine by himself and said he would work. The master of the mining doubted Roman's words but then accepted him. From then onward, Roman would spend his entire days mining the iron ore and taking in the dust. He tried to do as much work as he was assigned without even the slightest irritation. The roots of Dmitri might lie in the forge, but furthermore so in the iron mines. The origin of Dmitri is that the miners worked hard in the mines, and then we managed to use the ores over the flame and turn them into our power. I just want to experience and empathize with it. Only then can I truly understand their plight. In order for me to live in the name of Roman Dmitri, I cannot just coexist with the people of this land through simple understanding. Young master. Hans stopped walking as tears welled up from within. Just when did you grow up this much? Truly, Roman had suddenly grown up. Roman's walk now signified dignity and a different image. Hans was so proud to be under Roman. Despite Roman not waiting for him, Hans didn't care and caught up to him as he said, "From now on, I will take full responsibility for the young master's attire from morning to evening. I will clear this dust right away. As always, I will clean it all up. I, Hans, am ready to dedicate myself to you." Even if it was till the end of time, Hans followed Roman. Finally, the place Roman arrived at was the training ground. On the massive training ground, dozens of men were already sweating. 1. 2. 2. They were swinging their swords at the command. Chris walked in front of the soldiers and pointed out their forms, and the soldiers focused on wielding their swords by adjusting their forms. The war with Barco was an experience that aroused a blind loyalty within them. Didn't Roman simply defeat a 4-star swordsman? And didn't Chris also defeat a 3-star swordsman? After seeing that, their perception changed. They no longer thought Roman and Chris were at a level around them, much less the same as them. Chris. Yes? Chris ran at the call, and the soldiers continued to train regardless of that. When he arrived in front of him, Roman asked, "How is the training going?" "I am teaching them what the liege has taught me. Everyone is quite enthusiastic about learning it, so I think we can quickly develop our strength." The war was already over, but Roman felt the need to expand his power. Thus, through Chris, he taught them the basic training of the demonic sect. He was teaching the Azura cultivation for the internal chi and how to effectively defeat the opponent with the Azura sword technique. In fact, in the demonic sect, it was a mere basic technique. However, in Roman's world, it can be counted as one of the greatest treasures to ever exist. Roman rewarded those who followed him to the war by allowing them to learn the Azura sword technique and walk on the path that would lead them to become Aura swordsmen. Thus, even 30-year-old swordsmen could encounter the miracle of entering the path of Aura swordsmen. This alone will not be enough. This war had variables, the flare and Homer. It was information that Roman failed to get, and the lack of information made him almost fall into a trap. Fortunately, this time, strength solved the problems. However, his past life experiences have taught him that problems cannot be solved in that way forever. "I need my own information force. An information force that can analyze every detail of my opponent from head to toe. The only problem is that one needs money and manpower to create such a force, and I cannot afford it yet. So I have to find a way to make the most of it with my status and situation." The mine was just an extension of his plan. As he told Hans, there was the purpose of wanting to experience the roots of the family, but Roman wanted to see the true source of the Dmitri family. He wanted to see the reality as only when one understands the raw reality can they find a way to use it to their advantage. The man now known as Roman doesn't simply move. He always has a clear purpose, even in a situation where there are a lot of hazy things. He doesn't say anything and stays faithful to his role. And finally, Roman had one more thing to do. Chris, I will teach you a new sword technique now. Hearing Roman's words, Chris felt his heart skip a beat. Teach me a new sword technique? Chris felt dissatisfied when he taught the soldiers how to move their swords. It wasn't that he didn't trust Roman, but he couldn't understand Roman's intention as he didn't teach him anything. Well, he did learn the Azura sword technique and Azura cultivation technique. However, while teaching it, Roman told him to only learn it as a teacher and not practice or make it his main sword technique. And finally, Roman told him why he did that. You have a different starting line as compared to the others. Unlike people who didn't learn anything till now, it isn't easy for you to build your own world and accept new things. Thus, I hope to stimulate flexibility in your thoughts and broaden your mindset, to help you develop the ability to change your thoughts according to what you see and hear instead of being chained down to fixed thoughts and stereotypes. If you hadn't shown the courage to accept the new changes, you wouldn't have survived the battle with that 3-star Aura swordsman. The fight with Jansen was a simple test. And in that test, Chris overcame his limitations and beheaded a 3-star Aura swordsman. Now, he was ready to be taught new things. Seeing Chris looking at him with burning eyes without answering, Roman said, "The name of the sword technique I will teach you is lightning. Lightning sword technique, a technique so great that it once commanded the Murim." That technique, which was known as one of the great 10 techniques of Murim, was now being learned by Chris. Chapter 58. Everyone's Man. Part 4. Soon, the time for the banquet arrived. At the banquet, Roman's appearance was completely different from before. During the day, he was covered in dust from the mine, and then he and Chris spent time in the training ground right before the banquet, yet he appeared dignifiedly now. The appearance of Roman, whom everyone had been waiting for, was magnificent. When he walked into the banquet hall, the people who were talking held their breaths simultaneously. Young Master Roman Dmitri enters. Roman looked around and greeted people. There was not even the slightest stern look on him now. As this was a banquet being held for him, Roman understood and acted like the protagonist of the banquet, and despite being rejected by him earlier, the noble women still showed interest in him. "Mr. Roman, why did you act like that during the day?" "I just wanted to converse a little before the banquet. I had just finished my work in the mines, so I had no choice but to do that due to my shabby look. I hope you understand my desire to look a little good." "Ah, so that was the reason." Was it because they liked the answer of Roman? From then on, everyone smiled at Roman's words. Their intention was clear as crystal. They all wanted to make some sort of connection with Roman, and at some point, only women could be seen around him. Among them, Sylvia stood out the most. "You certainly look like a wonderful person. Even though you are the heir to a noble family, you were working directly in the mines. My father always said that we should live longing to learn what happens below us, but unlike Mr. Roman, I couldn't put it into practice. If I had someone like Mr. Roman as my spouse, wouldn't that make it possible for me to change as I would see things being done by my companion?" Hearing Sylvia's blatant words, the people around them had no choice but to be stunned. However, Sylvia didn't care the least. She was pretty. She knew well about her appearance and learned from her previous experiences that she should make the first move whenever she could to affect another's mind. Honestly, it wasn't a bad method, if it wasn't that the other person was Roman, someone who wasn't shaken even by the beauty of Flora Lawrence, the most beautiful woman in the Northeast. If it wasn't Roman, the method might have worked. "Thank you for the undeserved praise." That was all Roman said. With that, he ended the conversation. Although he kindly accepted questions from all directions, he never allowed much liberty to them. How much time had passed? Roman, who had been tormented by women for a long time, secretly moved away from the banquet, and just then, he heard a familiar voice from behind. "You seem good at acting." The owner of the voice looked at Roman. Obviously, it was Flora Lawrence. Roman's face didn't look as kind as before. He didn't have to put up a kind face in a place where no one was watching, so he spoke coldly. I had to do it. It is surprising. I didn't think you were the kind to care about the relationships between people. Normally, that is true. However, this is a banquet hosted by the Lawrence family for me, and my parents and their guests are watching. That means I must deviate from my usual behavior and act with minimal courtesy. And to say that it is surprising, I was the same when I first met you, as well. When Roman first met Flora, he was in robes. Thinking that the smell of blood wouldn't be polite, he sprayed some perfume and went out. Roman was such a kind person. Still, even though he was acting all nice, he showed appropriate behavior when needed. Flora said, "It is true. Rather, it was me who wasn't polite." In her memory, Roman was a man of virtue. During the marriage talks, he kept his manners till the end, and it was only after the annulment was announced that he began to show a cold attitude. Come to think of it, the change was all her fault. Roman had tried to keep a suitable distance as her partner, but Flora didn't even notice it. He was a consistent person, so she felt more curious. How could Roman live like this? How could he be so firm in his character? But why are you working with minors? Others think that it is a play for obtaining the title of the heir, but I don't remember hearing such things being done to become the heir. Wouldn't blacksmiths make more sense for the Dmitri family, not the mines? Roman normally wouldn't have answered Flora's question. However, when he remembered her appearance on the battlefield, he wanted to answer her due to her efforts. How do you think Lawrence reached its current position? People often think Lawrence was revived due to their crops and fertile soil, but that isn't the case. The Lawrence family is one that succeeded in commerce. They knew how to use the crops that were grown and sold them for the right prices. Lawrence is now what it is because of that process. I heard that Viscount Lawrence's younger brother also used that talent to succeed as a merchant in the capital. Hearing those words, Flora was utterly stunned. Lawrence's origin? Few people knew about it for sure. Honestly, even Flora thought fertile land was all Lawrence had not long ago. What's the significance of that here? I thought the forge and the iron mine was the foundation of Dmitri. Dmitri wouldn't have been successful like this today if it hadn't been for the miners who went into the iron mines every day. So, I wanted to fully understand Dmitri's land. I think it is the duty of one who has the name Dmitri attached to their name. If there comes a situation where I face one problem like Dmitri's people, I am sure that my time in the mines, which others cannot understand, will be of great help in empathizing with them. Roman's voice was firm. He said it as if it was something that was absolutely necessary. Seeing him come out assertively, Flora lost her words for a moment. Time is up. I need to go. Thus, the conversation ended as Roman Dmitri turned back without any more words. Flora looked at him and felt as if she had been hit hard on her head. Truly, Roman always astonished her each time they met. People had recently begun to call Roman Dmitri the man of all men. Dmitri's reputation of having a fool for a son was never brought up, and everyone looked up to him now. What if she was in the position of Roman? Would she be able to work in a mine even if she heard praises from all directions? No, I would never be able to do that. Honestly, anyone would have been like that. Sweet praises melt down the rationality in the brain, and even the most diligent person often falls due to them. They would try to enjoy reality from some point on. And it was especially true for someone like Roman. Even if he enjoyed the company of women, no one would criticize him. However, Roman was different. He neither got drunk on reality nor enjoyed it. As soon as the war was finished, he grabbed the pickaxe and headed straight for the mine, and while others enjoyed their lives, the hero slowly dug up iron in the mine. What kind of thoughts and mindset does he have that he lives and acts like that? Even Flora was someone who didn't waste time, but whenever she compared herself to Roman, she felt ashamed. He's such a great man. And he is respectful too. She wanted to imitate his actions. Aside from the fact that he was a bit selfish, Roman was her ideal man. Suddenly, Flora remembered what her father had said. From now on, live for your dreams. I will not repeat the same mistake of dropping your value to the ground and will be ready to support you anytime. Viscount Lawrence said he didn't want her to live as the Flower of Lawrence. He just wanted her to live as Flora Lawrence. Also, his words promising to support her in whatever way she wanted filled her head. What is my dream? No matter what she thought, she didn't have a clear dream. Nevertheless, one thing was certain: while watching Roman's progress, there was one thing she wanted to achieve. I must be strong so that others can never look at Lawrence again and to never entrust the safety of Lawrence to others. I want to overcome those dangers by becoming stronger myself. That is the goal I want to achieve. She made a decision and now had a firm dream. Her head, which was wandering around even after the war was over, had finally cleared up. After that, Flora left the banquet. There was no reason to stay there anymore. Now there was no reason to hold on to the being known as Roman Dmitri. A few days after, it was revealed that Flora had left Lawrence and had headed straight for the capital. It was the moment the Flower of Lawrence, the plant in the greenhouse, left the greenhouse and stepped out into the world. Time went by. It was revealed to everyone within a fortnight that the Barco family was destroyed. Today, a unique person visited the forge of Dmitri. Hendrik. Hendrik. What is it? What? I stopped by for a drink. The man with a small physique looked nervously at Hendrik as he left the forge and smiled. Seeing the bottle in his hand, Hendrik started drooling. It was lunchtime, so Hendrik hurriedly removed the items on the table. After all, you are the only one who understands me, Jacob. Right? The other man was Jacob. He, the overseer of the mine, poured alcohol into Hendrik's glass. Ugh, this is good. How was work today? It was the same as usual. No matter how much we dig, iron keeps coming out. We have only touched the first part of the mountain, so it seems the Dmitri family will easily be able to run off the iron mines for 100 more years. Ah, that is all. The life of Jacob the miner is like that. Hendrik and Jacob, the two pillars of Dmitri, often spent time together. Amid working hard, they often had a small break and took down the sweet drink. How long did they drink? Hendrik put down the glass and asked softly, but, what about Roman Dmitri's condition? A week back, there was a lot of talk about him working in the iron mine. But the mansion is quite silent about it, right? Did he quit the job? Ah, Roman? Jacob smiled as he took down another drink. Don't even ask. Far from quitting, he hasn't missed a single day of work yet. At first, everyone was reluctant to have him as his intentions weren't known, but no miner hates him now. Really? Hendrik was stunned. Miners were as proud beings as blacksmiths. So how could they come to like Roman? What exactly happened in the iron mines? A lot had happened in Dmitri's iron mine during the last full moon.